Welcome to this. This is the fifth session of CP 2023. I'm Jason Bramford. I'll be chairing this session. And we have four wonderful speakers today. I'm very much looking forward to their topics. The overall theme of the session today is ethics and technological transformation, which is a wonderful theme. And our first speaker is Professor James Brousseau from the Philosophy Department at Pace University in New York City. And as we've just heard, he's currently down in Trento in Italy. So he's Europe side at the moment and doing some interesting work there that I look forward to talking to you more about at some point. But for today, his talk is on the acceleration of AI ethics and the dispute between Stability AI's Diffusion and OpenAI's Dall-E, where he will be arguing that AI can be cast or recast as an innovation accelerator, so running against this dominant view that ethics is slowing down business, as it were. So I'm very much looking forward to this and give the floor to you, James.
Right. Well, thanks. I'm happy to be here and happy to be, right, as we were just commenting, happy to be on the European side for an agreeable spring. I thought I would just, what we're going to be doing today, as you've noticed, is talking about acceleration ethics. And I thought I would just start with a couple of slides. It seems like you can find these things, you almost cannot avoid seeing them on Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on, some form of this question about whether or not innovation and engineers and artificial intelligence, whether or not they should slow down to our speed, the speed of ethicists and lawyers and law and regulation, or on the other hand, is it our job, is it the job of ethicists and lawyers and regulators to speed up to AI innovation? And so here's just a standard case of it. This is just from a few days ago on Twitter that Joanna Bryson is saying, look, the Google and Microsoft simply have to slow down to the speed of the AI Act and the regulations that are being promulgated. And then Martin Tomei, I'm not sure who this is, but it would not surprise me to find out that he is an engineer in artificial intelligence or has some relationship with that side of the coin. And he points out, well, look, I mean, Google Bard is not in Europe. And the reason that Google Bard is not in Europe, I believe I understand this correctly, is because Google Bard is just like ChatGPT, more or less, in the sense, large language model. But what the Bard does is it actualizes to the present. So it's constantly training on data, present day data. And because for that reason, it's impossible for Google to confidently comply with European data regulations, because all the information is basically going in unfiltered right now. So we have this situation where essentially what's happening in Europe is that, at least in the case of Google Bard, they're slowing down to meet the demands of the regulators. Just another quick example. This is, instead of regulation, here we have law. And this is Clarissa Veliz, and she is saying that with respect to, again, these large language models, companies are betting that their products are so seductive that governments will have to adapt to them, as opposed to these companies adapting their products to the rule of law. So again, it's just this simple question. I mean, are the companies going to slow down to conventional law and the practices and behaviors of law that are traditional, or is law going to speed up to AI innovation and technological speeds? So that's the question at the heart of what I'm going to present. And I'm going to present it through the lens of something that now seems sort of old and distant. But at the time when the call for papers came out, this was the hot item, the big question. It was on one side, it was OpenAI's Dall-E, and on the other side, Stability Diffusion. And OpenAI, at least at that time, was much more partisan to the idea that that AI technology should slow down to conform with regulation. And that's changed a little bit now, as we've seen. But in any case, at that time, OpenAI was on the side of slowing development to meet regulation, and Stability was on the side of asking the regulators increase their velocity to meet the performance of their model. So it's the same question. It's just that there is some confusion because I think today many people might think that OpenAI is on the acceleration side. And maybe it is, because after Stability rose some huge amount of money in their one of their venture rounds, I think OpenAI changed their philosophy a little bit. In any case, what's important is not which company is on which side. What's important instead is just this simple question. Is it that regulators, ethicists, lawyers, and so on should increase their velocity to meet AI innovation, or by contrast, should AI innovation slow down to us? In this presentation, I am not going to try to answer that question. Instead, what I am going to do is I am going to say what it seems to me would be necessary were we to answer the question in the following way. Were we to say that ethics, and then subsequently regulators and lawyers and so on, it is our responsibility to speed up to the speed of AI innovation. If we decide we're going to do that, then how is it, what changes need to be made for that structure to come into place? And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm going to do that by first just a couple slides about the Dall-E and Stability divergence. And then we'll talk about these 5 elements that I believe create an acceleration ethics. And then I'll do just briefly a quick practical argument for acceleration ethics. So that's the plan for this presentation. And so we can begin. So Dall-E versus Stability. As I noted at the time, Stability, that was the innovation stampede. Stability was the one that was going out in front and just producing. It's an generative image model, and it was producing whatever images individuals wanted produced without restrictions, without limits. Whereas by contrast, Dall-E was proceeding from OpenAI. They were proceeding very cautiously with many rules and restrictions about who could use the platform, what could be produced, and so on. And that distinction led to this congresswoman from California, happens to be the Silicon Valley congresswoman. And she says, look, as a lawyer, she points out Diffusion can create images that OpenAI's Dall-E currently blocks, including the usual suspects, misinformation, and so on. And what she says, just like a lawyer would or a politician would, is look, Stability has got to slow down to Dall-E speeds. Stability has got to slow down to conform with legal regulations. So that's the dispute. Then what did I do? What I did is I took her letter, the text of her letter, and I put it as a prompt into the 2 platforms, into the Dall-E platform and into the Stability platform. And here's what I got out. Or let me say first, my idea was that this was the text of safety and innovation filtered by safety and innovation, or by the lack of it in the case of Stability. Here's what I got out. For some reason, it's hard to understand why, but for some reason, the Dall-E refused to create an image that corresponded with the text of that congresswoman's letter. Looks like this content may not follow our content policy, that this request may not follow it. Whereas by contrast, the Stability produced this image on, you forgive me, I don't know if it's your right or your left, but it's the strange 6-colored, vaguely Warhol-esque set of prints. I have no idea what that means or what it could mean, but Stability, noting that there is this distinction between the way this apparently banal, or I'm not sure if it's banal, but inoffensive letter by this California congresswoman, we're noting the different ways that letter converted into a prompt for an image generator was handled by Dall-E on one side and Stability on the other. And Dall-E did not produce an image corresponding with that. Stability did produce the Warhol-esque image. And I want to say, well, look, so this is sort of a perfect example of the text of, when you have a text of safety and innovation filtered by safety and innovation, we see a clear distinction between the kind of AI which is going to go forward independently to some extent. That's not quite the right word, which is going to go forward without regard for the kind of law, the kind of regulation, the kind of ethics that refuses to move at its speed. And so this is a perfect example of the question we looked at earlier. Is it going to be that ethicists will speed up for AI innovation, or will AI innovation slow down for us? What happened here is Dall-E slows down, stability doesn't. And then, as I noted earlier, I am not going to enter into the debate. It's an important debate, no doubt. I'm not going to enter the debate about which of those two options should be chosen. I'm instead going to say that if we are going to choose to accelerate AI ethics and subsequently law and regulation to the speed of AI innovation, then these are steps or reconfigurations of the structure of ethics that I believe will serve that purpose. So I have 5 elements of what I'm calling here acceleration ethics, and I thought we would go through those briskly in order. So the first is this idea that uncertainty itself is attractive. The idea that an image platform does not know what will be produced, or speaking more generally, that an AI, generative AI, does not know what will be produced, is itself magnetic, something that is desirable, something that is valuable in the ethical sense. Or stated slightly differently, not knowing what an AI will do is ethical justification for taking that action. And my sort of human experience model for that is traveling. I mean, all of us know what it's like to travel for some reason, right? You go to some place because you want to work there or because you want to meet someone. Now, all of us have traveled sometimes because there's something we want, but there's also a different kind of travel, which is the travel you do because you don't know what you're going to find. You don't know what to expect. And it's that unknown that drives you to get onto the airplane or into the car or onto the train. So I think there's that human attitude, there's that part of us that is attracted to the unknown. I think that's an essential element of acceleration ethics. And you can see it depicted here. The explicit reasoning of OpenAI is that, well, because we don't know what this text will produce, we're not going to produce it. Whereas by contrast, it's quite clear because of this disjoint nature between the text and the image, it's quite clear that on the stability side, there was no way to predict what the text would do. But for acceleration, that's a reason to do it. Uncertainty is encouraging. So that's step 1 of the idea of acceleration ethics. Step 2 is this idea that innovation is intrinsically valuable. That is, a generative AI, whether it's language or image or what have you, if it is innovative, it has value independently of and before we think about what its societal implications are. I think that that's what we see in stability. There's a kind of almost a kind of artistic aspect to the production. It actually looks like Warhol, right? There's this idea that producing something is good in and of itself. Whereas by contrast, in the case of OpenAI, it's quite clear that for them, they understand the value of innovation to only exist after that innovation has been tested in society, only after that innovation has been weighed in terms of whether or not it is beneficial or harmful in society. And if it's harmful, the innovation is not valuable. If it's beneficial, it is valuable. So there's this question about whether innovation has value intrinsically. And if it has value intrinsically, then you say it's worth having regardless of what happens downstream in society. And that's the acceleration position. Now, just quickly, I want to make sure to underline that doesn't mean that you automatically do every innovation you can do. It only means that the burden of stopping AI innovation falls on those who believe that the innovation is causing harm. Whereas by contrast, in the Dall-E case, when you say that the value will be decided by society, the burden falls on the AI and on the engineers to show what they're doing is valuable and good for society. So the only difference that occurs here is the burden shifts. It used to be that the AI and the engineers had to show why their work was worth doing. Now it's that those who want to restrict the work have to show why it should be restricted. So that's the second. The third, I think the third element is the most important element of acceleration ethics. It is the idea that, first, from the concession, the innovation, of course, it causes problems. Of course, it causes harms. But the question is, how do we face those harms? How do we confront them? For conventional ethics, it seems to me, the response is that we confront them by limiting the power of the artificial intelligence, limiting the data that it can have, limiting the number of users who have access, and so on. In other words, we respond with constrictions on the AI and on innovation. Whereas by contrast, on the acceleration side, what I want to argue is that the harms of innovation, they should always be managed by more innovation. So just a simple example, one thing that generative AI does on the image side is it creates harmful deepfake images, some that are violent or pornographic or what have you. The acceleration response is not to say, wait a minute, stop, because these images exist. Instead it is, let's go even faster ahead and find a new innovation which allows us to do things like detect automatically deepfake violence or pornography and delete it. Or perhaps along a different route, let's move ahead quickly to find a way to coat original images with some kind of perturbation which safeguards them against abusive uses. Or I read just yesterday an interesting paper about machine unlearning, which is the idea that when you find a platform is creating harmful kinds of outputs, you might be able to unlearn part of its data in order to fix those problems. In every case, however, what is important is that innovation is resolving the harms caused by innovation. So the answer to innovation's problems is more innovation, not less. I think that's the fundamental difference between acceleration ethics and conventional AI ethics. That's the third. The fourth, and this connects with the next presentation, so I will leave it to you, Katja, to take it to push this further, but I will just say quickly that for conventional ethics, as we know, think of the ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI from the European Union. This was produced by something literally called the high-level expert group. There could not be a better example of what centralized ethics looks like, right? A set of distant people on a hilltop creating rules for everyone else to follow. Decentralized ethics, instead, we will have to find a way for users to create the rules for their own platforms. We'll have to find feedback mechanisms for how individuals, and this connects with the idea of sort of swarm intelligence and swarm ethics, how individual users with their micro actions create a larger intelligence of ethics. So I think that this idea of acceleration, right, is the sense that regulation will be less prone to constrict innovation because it will be users themselves that are acting to shape the direction of AI innovation, as opposed to a group on a hill emitting restrictions and laws and regulations. And then finally, very quickly, the last idea is that for acceleration ethics is embedded in AI development. This is the idea. I think there may not be a great distinction here between the conventional and the acceleration model, but certainly for the acceleration model, the idea is that people like us, AI ethicists, will work with AI engineers in the process of developing and deploying their platforms. I personally have had this experience working with a group out of the German Big Data Lab and Roberto Zacari and others. And I can tell you that this is it's a very engaging process, very interesting process for all involved. And the central challenge there is creating a language that everybody can understand, from philosophers to lawyers to information engineers and so on. Creating that common language is the fundamental task of embedded AI ethics. And I believe that is also an element of acceleration. Okay. So that was a fast march, but those are the 5 elements of acceleration ethics. I will have them in a list in just a second. But having sort of concluded that these are the 5 elements that define what acceleration ethics would look like, and that would support ethically or provide ethical justification for the difference between OpenAI and Stability. And it would justify Stability's decision to produce images for this text prompt that led the OpenAI group to hesitate. So that's the power and the virtue of acceleration ethics. And then the last argument, and I will show a quick slide and then open the floor to questions. The last argument is, I promised at the start that I would not choose a side between conventional and acceleration ethics, and I won't. But I will just say quickly that it simply seems clear from the reality that artificial intelligence development is not bound by national borders. It does not require large amounts of people. Wildcat coders can go anywhere and code anything at any time. It just seems to me that the practical reality is that if the choice is between ethicists speeding up to AI and AI slowing down to ethicists, I think our idea that they should slow down for us is a bad strategy, because I don't think they will. I think that the reality is we will need to speed up to them. And if that's right, then what I've tried to offer today is one way of doing that. So to conclude, this is a general slide. I think that we will skip this. I will simply leave this slide up if anyone would like to pursue further with a question. This slide lists in compact form, the 5 elements of acceleration I discussed today. So with that, I open the floor to any questions or thoughts or objections or complaints.
Great, James. Thank you so much for your talk. I will just unmute people who want to ask questions. I guess you want to go, Katja?
Well, first of all, congratulations, James, for your presentation, which touched, like you said, many of the points we might also explore in our presentation with Daniele. What I particularly liked is the first element, which is the uncertainty. That uncertainty is encouraging. So, because nowadays we live in the fear of something falling on our head. Nice. And it freezes people, it paralyzes people. And I like very much that you see uncertainty, which is a little bit similar to serendipity in one sense, as a positive element of ethics. Whereas what we have seen for quite a while, it's more ethics as a regulatory tool. So you open up ethics, and I like that very much. Now, my question, if you allow, is, since you say it is accelerating, how far can we accelerate? Is there a plateau? Is there some kind of speed limit?
Right. This is a terrific question. I wish that I had some engineers to help consult me on this. Let me go back and come and touch on each of your previous 2 points, and then maybe work up to that. First is, I strongly agree with this idea of uncertainty, and there's also another way of thinking about it, or agreeing with what you were saying. It seems like increasingly people are concerned about the idea of risk as though zero risk is an ideal state. And so we should work to reduce to zero the level of risk that artificial intelligence produces. But then moving to your idea of serendipity, if we are going to have recommender systems, for example, that produce, and this is just a trivial example, but I think that the logic would work at a higher level. If we are going to have recommender systems that are going to, let's say, just recommend movies for me to watch, and I want to have some hope that I will discover something new and different, well, I have to have some risk that I'm going to receive a recommendation which just doesn't work for me. Right? And so serendipity, the idea that we can discover something new and different, requires risk. So the idea that risk is bad or risk should be reduced to zero, that makes no sense to me. I think that risk in some ways is good. And it is good exactly as you say, so when it touches on this question of serendipity. So I suppose we could just take that up. Of course, movies are just a trivial example, but you could move it up to a level of, say, LinkedIn and hiring and our professional lives. And maybe we could get LinkedIn would divert us to a kind of position that we would not have expected we would be appropriate for. And then you could lift that up even further to sort of dating websites and things, and you might be connected with someone who you would not have imagined you could be connected with otherwise. All of these kinds of potentials that AI presents for us, these beautiful moments of serendipity possibly, require risk. So I agree. Serendipity is good. Risk is good in a sense. I think acceleration fits together with those things because it's embracing the unknown. And then you have the final question, this idea, well, is there a speed limit? I think that unfortunately I'm boxed in here a little bit. It's a very perceptive question. I think I have a problem there because intrinsically to the logic of the argument, there is not a limit. So I think you put your finger on a problem. And then this problem was actually managed to some degree by George Bataille in the Accursed Share, the Parc Maudit in the 1960s probably, in something he called an excess economy. He says that it is part of human nature, in a sense, to always increase speed until there is kind of a breakdown or a collapse. And so following Bataille's logic, there would be a speed limit, but it would be some kind of collapse of artificial intelligence. Now, I don't know what that would look like or how that would occur, or it will be bad. It might be bad. I'm not certain. But it would seem like the only way, as far as I can see right now, it would seem like the only limit that could possibly exist would be one which would be some kind of large-scale breakdown. I'm not sure what that would look like. I suppose going back to my earlier argument, I would say, I don't think we have any choice but to find out. I'm not sure what that would look like. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. We have another question from Dugoshi.
Hi. Yes, Dane. My name appeared strangely today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I enjoyed the talk. I do want to challenge a little bit the strength of your intuition about our attraction for uncertainty. As a mother of 2 young children, if I'm going to travel, I don't want there to be any uncertainty, right? And then of course there's an uncertainty of positive outcomes. You know, am I going to meet an interesting person? Am I going to see into, through a window into the culture that I hadn't expected, that sort of thing. But we want to hedge the real risks, like, is there going to be a terrorist attack, or is the facade of this old historic building going to collapse while we're sitting there enjoying our coffee or something like that? So, yeah, I mean, I get, and I think it's maybe age specific too. You know, when I was 18, hopping on a train with a Europass, was exciting, and you didn't know what was going to happen, who you were going to meet. But at this point in my life, I don't want any uncertainty on a trip. You know, I want it to work out as I've planned. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there.
Right. That makes, as also a father of 2, I understand exactly where you're coming from. So my response there would say, or would be sort of leaning on the second was the second idea about the burden. I would say that even with your two children, right, that attraction to just leave the house and go to the train station and go, that attraction is still there. I mean, it's there now the same way it was when you were 18. But I mean, that attraction does not exist in isolation. It's simply that the force of your children looking at you presents a heavy enough ethical weight, right, to bury that intrinsic desire for uncertainty. So I have to say, and it's not clear whether or not it's difficult in terms of human experience, because I have been where you are at, and I understand how that sense of nervousness you have in the airport, right, when for even a split second you can't find one of your children, right? I mean, that moment of uncertainty is horrifying. Like your stomach drops. So I think, however, that I simply have to maintain at some points you simply have to maintain a theoretical position. And say my theoretical position is that the attraction of uncertainty is still there even at that moment that your child disappears. But it's simply that the practical weight of your responsibility to your children is so great that it submerges that desire for uncertainty during those years of your life.
Maybe, I mean, I would just say maybe uncertainty of a certain kind, right? Because uncertainty includes every kind of outcome. It could be horrific or it could be fantastic. And we all try to hedge. I mean, rational people try to hedge against a certain range of those. And then also, you know, when you plan a trip, you buy a ticket for somewhere because you know something about it. You don't, if you have all your marbles, you don't choose to go into a war zone with children or for tourist purposes, right? You go for the known. You go to Venice for very specific reasons. Yeah, maybe there's a little bit of what might happen, but not so much. Like, I mean, I can't say that it's just my kids that make me feel that way. But anyway, I mean, I hear your point. I think that changes over our course of life. I think there's a certain range that we have to always hedge against no matter what. So it's not this blanket desire for uncertainty. But anyway, thank you for
no. It's very good points, and we're just going to have to disagree about human experience. I'm simply saying that I believe that fundamental drive that you felt when you were 18, I believe it's still there, and it will be there years from now, and you will find it again, I think. But we'll see.
So I don't see another hand raised. So I'll ask a question too. I have two questions, but one both directly on this. So I mean, of course, this idea of uncertainty being encouraging runs directly against things like the precautionary principle, right? But I think what was also in the question from Dane just then is that, you know, in the kind of examples you're coming up with of this diving into the void and discovering the wonders that are there, it's this kind of it maybe might lead us to very narrowly look at what are the things to be gained and miss the broader harms about who is being harmed, who is shouldering the burdens, in what way the risks fall on different groups of our society. You know, we don't just say, well, let's open up an airline into an Amazon tribe, right? So we don't want tourists to just be there suddenly just destroying a way of life, right? So we'd have to think about who it is and in what way they're being impacted. And I worry that if we just kind of give into uncertainty as being encouraging, then we might start to lose marginalized voices, marginalized perspectives on this in favor of, well, this seems to be fun for us. You know, tourism is fun for us. So that kind of reasoning makes me actually think that maybe something like a more precautionary principle might be necessary for this, since we don't understand fully how these technologies, which are founded on principles from a dominant voice, might marginalize people further, right?
Right. I suppose I would respond to that on two levels. So the first level of response would be that I think that notion that there's a dominant or depending upon kind of the language you want to use, right? An oppressive sort of hegemonic power that imposes. I believe that's as true on your side as on my side. So, for example, I think the precautionary principle is not a neutral protective principle so much as it is simply a different expression of a kind of hegemonic view. So this is just a fundamental difference we have. I would see, I don't believe that there is one perspective or one way of approaching experience which is going to be fundamentally free of that kind of, I'm not sure I want to use the word risk. It's going to be fundamentally free of that kind of narrowness that you are expressing. So right, my first response would be, sort of right back at you, as they say. And then I think that the second response is that the more practical response is that I'm not sure that doing anything but flipping the burden to those who say, as you just did very capably, those who say, look, wait a minute. I mean, it is a curious idea to build a mega international airport in the middle of the Amazon. It is a curious idea. But when we actually think it through a little bit, we think, you know what, this is not worth doing for 1, 2, 3, or 4 number of reasons. Right? So I think that we would get to that conclusion that you're promoting, Jason, but I think we can get there without denying the idea that at least for a moment, you know, someone says, oh, how about we build a major, what is it, Dubai-like airport in the Amazon, at least for a moment. Right? There's a thought, well, that's a curious idea. I wonder where that could go. I wonder what that might do. I wonder where that might lead. So I think that it seems to me you can have that and maintain that while still having protections. It's simply that the burden is on you to raise those objections instead of upon, let's say, if I'm the AI producer, instead of upon me to produce this plan for the airport, if that makes sense.
Great. Thank you for your response, James. I think we could go back and forth on this for a while and to keep an eye on time. So we'll just thank you very much for your presentation and encourage anybody who has more questions, I guess, to get in touch with you, right?
Please, yes, of course.
Absolutely. Okay. So